The Tigris River provides the residents of Mosul with welcome relief from the oppressive summer heat. Perhaps for a few moments, these youngsters can forget the war that robbed them of their childhood. The black flags of the Islamic State no longer fly over Iraq's second largest city. The Al-Nouri Mosque, blown up by IS in 2017, is now being reconstructed. In 2014, IS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi came to the mosque to announce the creation of the Islamic State Caliphate. The effort by the Iraqi army and its allies to drive IS out of the city caused heavy damage and killed or wounded thousands of civilians. Now, 2 years later, many local residents still have not recovered from the effects of the war. They've suffered too much, and their grief cannot be measured. More than 35,000 people live at this camp for displaced persons in the town of Hammam al-Alil, about 20 kilometers south of Mosul. Most of the residents are alleged to have ties to IS fighters. There are a number of orphans and widows here. One of those widows lives in this tent with her 5 children. Her name is Raoul. Her husband was killed in an air raid on a mosque in Mosul. He was the muezzin, or prayer leader there. Raoul says he did not belong to IS. As Iraqi troops clashed with Islamic State fighters in 2017, she and her children fled. They've lived in this tent ever since.
The authorities say that my husband was a member of IS, and that's why they refuse to give us identity documents. They say we're an IS family. And because we don't have those documents, we can't leave the camp. We can't go anywhere.
Raoul and her family spend much of the day watching TV. She herself was not a member of IS, but the wives and children of Islamic State fighters are paying a heavy price for crimes committed by their husbands and fathers. Omar is 8 years old, and he's now the breadwinner in his family. He's just come home from his job in town. He walked for 2 kilometers, so he's hot and tired.
Did he pay you?
No.
Why not?
He just didn't.
Are you tired? Did they give you anything to eat? Have you eaten at all?
No.
Omar talked a grocer into giving him a bag of tomatoes. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. He earns the equivalent of less than €1 a day as a workman's assistant.
We used to live well. Then we came here and I started working.
He's all I have. Sometimes I think we deserve this, but then again, my children are not at fault. They and other family members haven't committed any crimes. I'm afraid of the Iraqi troops. I don't have any documents, and the authorities say that my husband was in IS. All I want is my identity papers.
Without those documents, the children can't go to school. The camp is run by international NGOs, but Iraqi law applies here.
In April, the Ministry of Education announced that schools will no longer accept children who don't have ID papers. They have to apply at the ministry to get them. If they don't, they won't be registered, and their school year won't count. The new regulations apply to IS families in particular. The ministry says we can't admit those children. If they don't have the documents, I can't help them.
These families also need papers to qualify for food aid from the Iraqi government. Today, an international organization is handing out surplus flour to large families. But the flour could spoil in the extreme heat. Families that don't have ID documents have to rely exclusively on international food aid.
We only get flour and rice. There's no more salt, sugar, oil, or even whole grains. We're grateful for what they give us, but we need those identification papers. We can't go on like this. When I go to see the security authorities, they hold up my file and say, "Your husband was in IS. We're not going to help you."
Raoul is fairly comfortable here. Her sister's tent has some benches and other furniture. The children seem to be getting along well. But Omar can't forget that he's the only member of the family who's earning money.
Did they pay you?
The boss said not till this afternoon.
But he said this morning.
I don't know. He said afternoon.
Are you going to work tomorrow?
I don't know.
Your boss is a dog. He said he pays in the morning.
Same as yesterday.
Will they hand out more food soon?
Probably some flour.
Do you have any left?
A little.
It's probably spoiled.
They said there'd be flour.
Right now, nearly 900,000 children are living in displaced persons camps around Iraq. An estimated 45,000 of them have no identification documents. Countless other children live in miserable conditions outside the camps. Iraqis refer to the ID papers as the gold square. They're an indispensable part of everyday life. People need these documents to travel or apply for a job or for food aid. To get these documents, people have to go to their local police station. The process includes an interview with a representative of the security forces. That can be intimidating for a single woman or the widow of an Islamic State fighter.
IS still poses a threat. If those fighters are still alive, their women will try to help them. Sometimes insurgents will get new papers and try to sneak back into society. They'll change their appearance, they'll shave off their beard or grow a new one. I think these IS families are really dangerous. They hate the security forces and they hate Iraq. All they care about is causing destruction and bloodshed.
Islamic State once controlled large parts of Iraq and Syria. It has now lost almost all of that territory. But several thousand IS fighters remain in Iraq, and they're still dangerous. Insurgents have launched attacks on villages near Hammam al-Alil, and they've placed improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, along the roads. There's some sort of incident every week. They've burned down much of the vegetation along this part of the Tigris River. This open land is a perfect place for insurgents to hide and launch their attacks. But terrorist activity is rare in Mosul. That's small compensation for children like Omar, who work on the streets for very little money. The children often do jobs that no one else wants. This 14-year-old boy and his cousin are emptying garbage bins. They're paid by local merchants and private citizens. These children earn the equivalent of less than €3 a day.
I have to make some money so I can buy food for my family.
It just breaks my heart to see these kids living like this. They don't go to school and they have no future, none at all. They have to work to provide food for themselves and for their family. There's no shame in working, but they do this because they have to.
If you don't pay the kids to empty the bins, they'll just fill up. At least they're making some money. The city certainly won't pay them. This is the Nabi Yunus shopping street in central Mosul. It survived the war largely unscathed. Children also work here for pennies a day. They are the countless, tireless little workers in post-war Mosul.
Most of the kids here are orphans. Their fathers, mothers, or brothers are dead, or they lost their home during the war. They don't earn a lot for this kind of work, just enough to survive. Aboud's parents are still alive, but their house was destroyed in the fighting. They're rebuilding it bit by bit, and Aboud helps to pay for that.
But many other children in Mosul have lost their entire families. The municipal orphanage has now reopened its doors and takes care of about 50 children, but that's just a fraction of the total number. Life for orphans is difficult anywhere, but particularly in Muslim countries. Orphanages are rare, and although Muslims are encouraged to care for these children, adoption in the Western sense is controversial. They may be the children of IS fighters or Iraqi soldiers. They may simply be poor, hungry, or homeless. Some were sex slaves for the terrorists. But their lives were changed forever by a conflict over which they had no control.
We don't distinguish between IS children and others. We don't even use the words IS. They are children, period. They're not to blame.
The liberation of Mosul was a welcome victory for the Iraqi army and its allies. But that victory was achieved at a terrible cost to the local residents. The parents of the children who lived in this house were killed in the war. They're being raised by an aunt. The youngest child can't even remember her mother and father. The boys all want to become military officers. The oldest of them is 17, and he can enlist soon.
I went back to school so that I could join the army. I want to keep IS from coming back. They're savages, and they've taken everything from us. They killed my parents. When I think about Islamic State, I get so angry that I want to join the army and fight them.
For some people here, the grief will never end. Many have tried to expunge the Islamic State from their collective memory. Some have whitewashed the black flags that IS painted on the walls. Daesh, the name for IS used almost universally by Arabic speakers, has been painted on buildings. such as this one, although it actually houses the office of a local elected government official called a mukhtar. His primary job is to help people work their way through the bureaucracy.
I need IDs for the family and both witnesses. Then you can have your disability card.
Great. I'll be back in 10 minutes.
The owners of this house are IS,
Why the graffiti?
so you know it's an IS house.
Doesn't that bother you?
Absolutely not. IS wrote Christian or infidel on the homes of civilians and government workers. They started all this, and now we're doing the same to them.
So you behave like they did.
No, no. But it's a case of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's payback time. Let's see your ID card.
The mukhtar keeps a close watch on all the official paperwork, including applications for the all-important Gold Square document. He's especially vigilant when it comes to suspected IS families.
They come in here and try to get new papers, but I know them, and they won't get any.
These people have to leave Iraq, even though they're Iraqi citizens. They've shed too much blood. They've killed too many people. Do you want someone like that living next door to you? Do you want them living in your town? It's just not acceptable.
Islamic State killed children, old people, officers and soldiers. And we should let these people back into the community? Their kids are just like them. IS killed our children.
You have to pay a price for hurting people. The IS fighters should have thought about that beforehand. They should have thought about their children, their wives, their brothers, their family, their tribe. They knew this would be a dead end. You can't join IS, commit awful crimes, and then expect us to take care of your kids. Absolutely not.
So this mukhtar is committed to keeping suspected IS family members out of his neighborhood. But some people are reportedly taking the law into their own hands. There are rumors going around that some who've been linked to Islamic State have been killed by local residents. Some IS family members fear for their safety, to the point where they've gone into hiding. We've come to a suburb of Mosul to meet some of them. We wanted to find out whether they still support an organization that is now condemned by so many local residents.
Your opinion of IS?
I thought it was fine, to tell you the truth. I could practice my religion as I wished with no restrictions. So I enjoyed my life under Islamic State. Things were better back then. Nowadays, everyone gives us a hard time. With IS, we felt secure. Everything was fine. Now we don't feel safe anymore. If I want to go out in public, I have to sneak out of the house.
This woman's husband is said to have been an IS fighter. She says he's dead, but he supposedly survived the Battle of Mosul. She claims to know nothing about his work, as she calls it.
Sometimes he said he was a soldier. Other times he said he was a commander. I don't know for sure. He never told me about his work. He didn't trust anyone. Of course, his work frightens me, but I don't know anything about it. And I'm scared, because he did that work for a long time. And that's why the authorities are looking for him. I'm afraid that they'll arrest me because of him.
So bring back IS?
Considering my situation, I'd like to see that.
She has a 10-year-old son, one of the Islamic State child soldiers, the lion cubs of the caliphate. They were trained in special camps, but IS also used them as human shields. We've agreed not to show his face. He suffers from a nervous tic and vision problems.
I've been exercising to make myself stronger. I do push-ups and target practice by throwing rocks at bottles.
The boy works at a construction site in Mosul to earn money to help his family. So far, he's managed to escape the security patrols that are constantly on the lookout for Islamic State sleeper cells. Reports say an estimated 20,000 people who have alleged ties to IS are being held in Iraqi prisons. Among them are several hundred former child soldiers. What will become of these prisoners? The authorities seem to have forgotten that Islamic State's origins can be traced back to a U.S. detention facility that was set up in 2003 during the Iraq War. The prisoners could decide to join forces just as they did back then. Baghdad-based authorities have now come to Mosul to make sure that all residents are properly registered. The Norwegian refugee aid organization that manages this camp also offers legal advice to widows. This mother needs documents for her 2-year-old son, who was born after the Battle of Mosul.
Was he born in a hospital or a tent?
In a tent.
How many in the family?
7.
And
he's your youngest?
Yes.
Do you work or stay at home?
I stayed home.
At home?
Yes.
And your husband?
He's dead.
Did he stay with you?
When they arrived, he waited a year and then joined them.
Is he wanted? Is he wanted?
Oh, I don't know, but I applied for a security clearance from the authorities.
Did you get it? Do you have the documents?
Yes. Yes, here they are.
Show me.
That security clearance is called a tabriya. It proves that a spouse is no longer legally wed to an IS member. It gives people who are suspected of having ties to IS the opportunity to start life with a clean slate. The tabriya is mandatory, even if, as in this case, the family member never actually belonged to Islamic State.
I told my husband, don't join them. Think of our children. He said, God will protect you.
This morning, more than 600 residents of the Hammam al-Halil camp are to be sent back to their home regions. And the Norwegian aid organization can't do anything to stop it. All the representatives can do is keep an eye on the situation, because the Iraqi government has the final say. Critics consider such actions forced repatriations, which are illegal under international human rights law. Go on, in you go. Take your daughter too.
They face an uncertain future. Disabled and sick people are just being herded onto the bus. It's unacceptable.
We don't know where we're going.
They're just moving you to another camp.
What camp? No one's told us anything.
We're not just going to dump you someplace.
They didn't say we're going to another camp. They just said, you're leaving.
This is official government policy. But you can ask the authorities to take you to another camp.
We don't want to leave this camp. We're safe here. There are no Iraqi troops here, and no one's harassing us. They treat us well here. That's why we want to stay. If we return to our home region, there might be trouble.
Some families have already received death threats on social media because of their alleged ties to IS. In the district of Al-Halawija, about 100 kilometers southwest of here, some victims of Islamic State terrorist attacks are said to be plotting revenge against the returnees. That could have deadly consequences for some of these people, most of whom are women and children. These are the first major forced repatriations from this camp, and the authorities say there will be more. The gradual closing of the camps is yet another indication that the government is serious about restoring law and order in Iraq. But for these families, it's a potentially dangerous journey into the unknown. Because of the deportation operation, the rest of the residents have to stay in their tents. That means that Omar won't be able to go to work today. His mother is nervous right now. Everyone knows what's going on outside.
Of course I'm scared. Yesterday I heard that they were going to shut down the camp. I couldn't sleep all night. What am I supposed to do? I still don't have any ID papers. That's my big problem right now, not revenge attacks. I want to stay here.
Now that Mosul has been liberated, the Iraqi authorities are working to restore order. But regardless of where these families end up, they are marked for life by their association, real or alleged, with a ruthless terrorist organization. And we have not heard the last of Islamic State.